Along with natural disasters, infectious diseases are among the top unintentional causes of human death. In certain cases, like that of the Bubonic Plague, population levels were drastically reduced for centuries afterwards. In other cases, such as polio, the infection of a renowned individual led to the further recognition of a disease and the need for a cure. Here are the top 10 pandemics that have significantly changed the course of history. 10. Bubonic Plague. The Bubonic Plague, also known as the Black Death, spread across Europe from east to west during the 14th century. The Yersinia pestis bacterium was responsible for the epidemic and used rat fleas as its intermediary in reaching the human population. The symptoms were gruesome. They started with fever and sweating, but progressed to blackish-blue abscesses across the groin. If the abscesses weren't drained, they grow bigger and people would die from the toxic buildup. However, draining the abscesses was often just as deadly and could lead to the pathogen becoming airborne. The mortality rate with this disease was upward of 70%, killing up to 200 million across Europe and cutting the continent's population in half. Historians believe that the spread of the bubonic plague contributed to the fall of the feudal economic system and caused irreparable damage to the church. 9. Smallpox. When Europeans first arrived in the New World during the late 15th and early 16th centuries, they brought smallpox, which played an instrumental role in killing Native Americans. Europeans from the Old World had a long history of living in close quarters with domesticated animals as well as eating and drinking from similar sources. This led to the spread of many diseases. But those who survived developed an impressive immunity to those deadly pathogens. These individuals were among America's first settlers who brought smallpox to the continent. In conjunction with other Old World diseases like the flu and measles, smallpox went on to kill almost 90% of the Native American population. Smallpox was also a vicious deforming agent, leaving those infected with noticeable sores across their bodies. Fast forward several centuries, now smallpox is fully eradicated from the human population due to vaccination efforts. Today, smallpox can only be found in exceedingly guarded labs. 8. Spanish flu. The 1918 flu pandemic was caused by one of the deadliest 20th century pathogens, infecting 500 million individuals worldwide. Outbreaks in the United States and Europe soon spread around the world. Although this deadly strain of the flu ravaged population centers indiscriminately, it quickly gained the name Spanish flu as Spain was hit particularly hard by it. Even Spain's King Alfonso XIII contracted it. Spanish flu had a noticeable effect on World War I as it infected many young, otherwise healthy individuals. The flu's effects were noted across the economy and military. Many believe that the outbreak influenced the direction of World War I by infecting militias and destroying medical infrastructure. 7. Polio. Today, polio is exceedingly rare, with relatively few cases in the industrialized world since Jonas Salk developed a polio vaccine. Prior to the creation of a vaccine, polio was easily transmitted in an infected individual's stool or via respiratory droplets. Polio is commonly asymptomatic. Yet when symptoms do present themselves, they can be debilitating. The disease is notorious for paralyzing its victims, requiring them to use iron lungs for the rest of their lives. Paralysis caused by polio can't be reversed. The best-known individual to suffer polio paralysis was former US President Franklin D. Roosevelt. His efforts to combat the stigma of the disease touched every aspect of the presidency in the years leading up to and through World War II. 6. Syphilis. There are 4 stages of syphilis, a sexually transmitted disease that first appears with an ulcer at the spot of infection. Secondary syphilis presents with a widespread rash and swollen lymph nodes. The bacteria then enters a dormant stage before surfacing as tertiary syphilis, which leads to nerve and muscle weakness, blindness, and dementia. Historians are unsure as to how syphilis got a footing in European populations, but the leading hypothesis says that it was an import from New World colonization. Syphilis had a long history of inspiring worthless medical remedies such as the use of mercury, which often made the infection worse. Today, syphilis is still widespread, though it can often be cured with penicillin. 5. HIV and AIDS. Few diseases have carried the stigma of human immunodeficiency virus or HIV, which transforms into acquired immunodeficiency syndrome or AIDS. Scientists believe that the virus crossed over from apes to humans in Africa during the early 20th century. Yet the disease didn't gain traction in popular culture until the early 1980s, when several gay men in New York and California exhibited strange cases of pneumonia and cancer. Its initial association with gay men led to the early name gay-related immune deficiency. Fear swept across Europe and the United States as individuals were unsure what modes were responsible for spreading the disease. HIV's association with the gay community led to the development of activist groups like ACT UP, helping to propel early LGBT advocacy and solidify eventual rights for sexual minorities decades later. 4. Tuberculosis. Tuberculosis or TB is a deadly respiratory infection that can take two forms, latent TB and active TB. Latent TB isn't contagious, and one's immune system can often fight it off. In fact, 1/3 of the world's population has latent TB. In people with weak immune systems, such as those with AIDS, active TB can take hold. Symptoms include coughing, severe chest pain, night sweats, and loss of appetite. Tuberculosis has left its mark on science in more than one way. In the 19th century, TB was often spread through milk. This led to the development of batch pasteurization, a low-temperature method of pasteurization which has its roots in eradicating TB in dairy products. 3. Malaria. Malaria is a mosquito-borne disease caused by parasites that leave those infected with flu-like symptoms. Malaria remains one of the world's most serious killers, infecting more than 200 million in 2016 and killing almost 500,000. Malaria and resistance to it lent a hand in the brutal transatlantic slave trade. There is no evidence of malaria in pre-colonial America, and thus its introduction ravaged native populations. People of Africa were resistant to malaria if they survived the disease as children. When they were brought to the Americas as slaves, malaria spread like wildfire across the American South, killing off many Native Americans. On the medical side, malaria provided scientists with a fundamental understanding of transmission vectors, including how disease-carrying animals can infect human populations and what can be done to stop them. 2. Ebola. Few diseases have fueled hysteria quite like Ebola, which was only discovered in Africa in the late 1970s. Ebola is a virus that leads to extreme bleeding in humans. Symptoms can take several days to weeks to develop. They include sore throat, muscle pain, vomiting, diarrhea, and eventually bleeding. Ebola comes with a high mortality rate, killing almost half of those it infects. The deadliest Ebola outbreak spread out of West Africa in March 2014. It killed 5 times more individuals than all previous outbreaks combined. Cases were reported in the United States and Europe, including the UK, France, Germany, and Spain. Full containment of the virus didn't occur until 2016. Its spread and aftermath dramatically tested the World Health Organization's ability to respond to a modern pandemic. 1. Cholera. At its worst, cholera can go from asymptomatic to fatal in just under 3 hours. Cholera is a diarrheal disease caused by bacteria that's usually spread through water or food systems that lack proper sanitation. There have been pandemics in South Asia, Africa, and the Americas. Every year, there are as many as 4 million cases of cholera with more than 100,000 dying as a result. As of July 28, 2010, the United Nations resolved to explicitly recognize clean drinking water as a human right, a development inherently tied to the spread of waterborne bacteria.